The air was thick with the scent of vanilla frosting, and the colorful streamers danced gently in the soft breeze that filtered through the open windows of our family home. I could hear laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses, a cacophony of joy that seemed to mock my internal turmoil. It was my birthday, a day meant for celebration, yet a gnawing anxiety settled in my stomach. I felt the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me, a pressure cooker ready to explode. As I walked into the living room, I caught sight of the table adorned with a beautifully decorated cake, its layers promising sweetness that felt out of reach. My mother, Clara, stood by the table, her face lit up with a smile that felt both comforting and suffocating. "Happy birthday, Zoe," she beamed, her eyes sparkling with love. I forced a smile in return, but inside I was wrestling with a mix of anticipation and dread. The laughter around me was a reminder of the fragile state of our family, a facade that could shatter at any moment. Then came the moment that changed everything. Clara presented me with a gift, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. As I unwrapped it, the room fell silent, all eyes on me. It was a locket, intricately designed, and inside it held a picture of us from years ago, a time when everything felt simpler. The warmth of nostalgia washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming urge to rebel against the suffocating love. I could feel the laughter of my relatives around me, a chorus of expectations that I was desperate to escape. In a moment of impulsive frustration, I blurted out a joke that landed awkwardly, and the laughter that followed felt forced. I could see Clara's smile falter, a flicker of hurt in her eyes. It was a mistake, one that echoed in my mind as I tried to recover the moment, but the damage had been done. The air grew heavy with unspoken words, and I could sense the tension rising, a storm brewing beneath the surface of our celebration. As the evening wore on, I found myself retreating to a quiet corner, the noise of the party fading into a dull roar. I could hear my heartbeat, a rapid drum in my ears as I reflected on my actions. The laughter, the gifts, the love, none of it felt genuine anymore. I was trapped in a cycle of conflicting emotions, wanting to enjoy my birthday yet feeling the strain of my relationship with Clara like a noose tightening around my throat. The night ended with me feeling more isolated than ever, surrounded by family but utterly alone. I had hoped for a day of joy, but instead I was left with a heavy heart and the weight of my words looming over me. What had I done? The dinner table was set, each place carefully arranged, but the atmosphere was anything but inviting. I could see Clara bustling around, her movements tense as she tried to maintain an air of normalcy. The savory aroma of roasted chicken filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of the flowers from the centerpiece, yet I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The family photos hung on the walls, capturing moments of laughter and joy that now felt like a cruel reminder of our fractured bond. As we sat down, I forced a smile, but I could see the flicker of disappointment in Clara's eyes. "Let's toast to family," my father announced, raising his glass, his voice bright yet tinged with an undercurrent of concern. I clinked my glass against his, but the sound felt hollow, echoing the distance that had grown between Clara and me. The conversation flowed around me, but I felt detached, as if I were observing from behind a glass wall. I glanced at Clara, her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. The warmth of the moment was overshadowed by the tension we both felt. It was as if we were caught in a game of charades, pretending to play our roles while the truth simmered just beneath the surface. I could sense the unspoken words hanging in the air, waiting for the right moment to explode. Then came the moment I had dreaded. As my father asked about my plans for the future, I felt Clara's gaze on me, urging me to share more than I was willing to reveal. I hesitated, my heart racing. I wanted to reconnect, to ease the strain between us, but the past grievances loomed large in my mind. I've been thinking about taking some time away," I blurted out, the words slipping from my lips before I could stop them. Clara's expression shifted, surprise morphed into hurt, and I could see the pain etched on her face. It was a misstep, a moment where I felt the weight of my own impulsiveness crashing down on me. The silence that followed was deafening, an acknowledgement of the rift that had opened wider between us. Dinner continued in awkward silence, the clattering of utensils filling the void of conversation. I could feel Clara's eyes on me, filled with disappointment and confusion. I wanted to reach out to bridge the gap, but the fear of further hurting her held me back. How could I mend what I had broken? The thought lingered, heavy and oppressive, as I pushed my food around my plate, the flavors lost on me. We were both trapped in this cycle of hurt, and I felt powerless to change it. As the evening drew to a close, I could see Clara retreating into herself, her laughter replaced by a fragile smile. I wanted to reach across the table, to tell her how much I loved her, but the words felt stuck in my throat. The distance between us was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her for good. My heart ached with the realization that reconnection would be harder than I had anticipated, and yet I knew I had to try, even if it felt like an uphill battle. The quiet of my bedroom felt oppressive, the walls closing in as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The soft glow of the lamp cast shadows across my face, highlighting the turmoil brewing within me. I could see the remnants of my birthday makeup smudged beneath my eyes, a stark reminder of the joy I had pretended to feel just hours ago. Guilt twisted in my stomach like a knot, and I pressed my palms against my thighs, trying to ground myself. How had I let my emotions spiral so far out of control? As I replayed the moments of that night, my heart sank deeper into regret. Clara's face, once radiant with excitement and love, now haunted my thoughts. I could still see the flicker of hurt in her eyes when I made that awful joke, the way her smile faltered like a candle extinguished by a sudden gust of wind. My impulsive words had cut through the air, sharp and unyielding, leaving behind a wound that I was desperate to heal. The thought of losing her, the very essence of warmth in my life, sent a shiver through me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside. Memories flooded my mind, vivid and unrelenting. I remembered the countless times Clara had been there for me, her laughter echoing in the hallways of our home, the embraces that felt like sanctuary. Yet in that moment of weakness, I had thrown it all away. I rose from the bed, pacing the small space, my fingers brushing against the cool surface of the furniture, as if seeking comfort from the inanimate objects around me. The weight of my actions pressed heavily on my shoulders, and I found myself wishing for a time machine, a way to go back and rewrite that moment. What had possessed me to lash out like that? I knew I needed to confront Clara, to apologize and try to mend the rift I had created, but the fear of her reaction loomed large in my mind. Would she even want to hear me out? Or would my words only deepen the chasm between us? With a determined breath, I resolved to face her. I couldn't let this moment define our relationship. I glanced at the clock, the hands ticking away as if mocking my hesitation. The family gathering was tomorrow, and I needed to find a way to break the ice before it hardened into something unbridgeable. The thought filled me with anxiety, but I also felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could salvage what was left of our bond. The next day arrived with an air of tension thick enough to cut. The kitchen was bustling with activity as I helped prepare dinner, but the excitement felt muted, overshadowed by the unspoken words hanging in the air. Clara moved around the room with purpose, her demeanor a mix of determination and hurt. I could see the way her shoulders tensed with every clattering pot and pan. I wanted to reach out to tell her I was sorry, but the words felt lodged in my throat, heavy and unyielding. Finally, as we set the table, I summoned the courage to speak. "Mom, can we talk?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with vulnerability. Clara paused, her back to me, the silence stretching out like a taut wire ready to snap. I could hear the faint sound of my heart pounding in my ears, a reminder of the stakes at play. Would this be the moment where everything changed for the better, or would it only serve to push us further apart? She turned slowly, her eyes searching mine for sincerity. "What is it, Zoe?" she asked, her voice steady yet laced with an underlying tremor. I felt a wave of emotion crash over me, the weight of my previous hurtful words crashing down in that instant. I took a step closer, my hands trembling by my sides as I prepared to apologize for my thoughtlessness, hoping to bridge the gap I had created between us. As I opened my mouth to speak, I felt the air grow thick with tension, a palpable reminder of the fragile state of our relationship. I needed to say the right words, to convey the depth of my regret and the desire to mend what I had broken. But as I stood there, my heart racing, I realized that the road to redemption was not going to be easy, and I had to brace myself for whatever came next. In that moment, I understood that I was not just seeking forgiveness for my actions, but also striving to understand the pain I had inflicted. I had to face the consequences of my impulsive words, and as I looked into Clara's eyes, I knew that this confrontation could either heal us or drive us further apart. I swallowed hard, ready to take the first step toward reconciliation, even if it meant confronting my own fears in the process. The hospital hallway was stark and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees. The scent of antiseptic burned my nostrils, mixing with the faint, metallic aroma of fear that hung heavy in the air. My heart raced as I paced back and forth, the tiles cool beneath my feet, grounding me in a reality I had never wanted to face. Clara had collapsed at dinner, the weight of my words crashing down on me like a tidal wave, and now I was left grappling with the consequences of my actions. As I sat on the cold plastic chair, I could hear the muffled sounds of nurses chatting and the distant beeping of machines, each sound a reminder of how fragile life was. My fingers trembled as I clutched my phone, the screen lighting up with messages from family members, each one a variation of shock and concern. "How is she?" they asked, and I felt the guilt clawing at my insides. I should have been more considerate, should have seen the warning signs of her distress, and now I was left with a sense of dread that settled in my stomach like lead. Anxious thoughts spiraled through my mind as I waited for news. I recalled the moments leading up to that fateful dinner, the tension in Clara's voice, the sadness in her eyes as I had pushed her away with my careless joke. Each flashback felt like a dagger twisting deeper with every memory. I had a chance to mend things, to show her I cared, but instead I had pushed her toward this precipice. When the doctor finally emerged, my heart raced. His expression was a mix of professionalism and empathy, and I braced myself for the worst. Clara is stable, but she's been under a lot of stress. We recommend some time for recovery and support from loved ones, he explained. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of shame. My actions had contributed to this moment. I had pushed her to the brink. As I stepped into the hospital room, the beeping of the heart monitor punctuated the silence. Clara lay there, pale and fragile, and I felt a lump in my throat as I remembered her vibrant laughter, now replaced by the stillness of the room. I hesitated, watching the rise and fall of her chest, trying to muster the courage to approach her bedside. What could I possibly say to convey the depth of my regret? I finally took a seat beside her, my fingers trembling as I reached out to hold her hand. It was cool and lifeless in my grasp, a stark contrast to the warmth I had always known. "Mom, I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of my remorse. I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I fought them back, unwilling to let my emotions spill over. Clara stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. There was a moment of recognition, a flicker of warmth that ignited a spark of hope within me, but then, as her gaze met mine, I saw the hurt reflected back at me. "Zoe," she murmured, her voice faint but filled with unspoken questions. I felt my heart clench at the sight of her pain, and I knew I had to do better. I didn't mean what I said. I was selfish and impulsive, and I never wanted to hurt you. "I love you more than anything," I confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. I could see the conflict in her eyes, a mix of love and disappointment that left me feeling small. In that moment, the gravity of my previous actions bore down on me, and I realized that this was only the beginning of the long road to redemption. I had hurt the one person who had always stood by me, and now I had to confront the mess I'd made. My heart ached with the thought of losing her forever, and as I squeezed her hand tighter, I vowed to do whatever it took to help her heal, starting with myself. The doctor's words echoed in my mind, support from loved ones. I had to be that support, to show Clara that I was willing to change, to fight for our relationship. This was the final trigger I needed to confront my past mistakes, and as I sat there, I knew I had to prove to her that I was ready to rebuild what I had broken. But it wouldn't be easy, and I had to brace myself for the challenges ahead. As I sat by her side, I felt a flicker of determination replace the fear. I would help Clara recover, and in doing so, I would also seek to heal the wounds within myself. This was just the beginning of a long journey, but I was ready to face it head-on, no matter how difficult it might be. The path to redemption would be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to make things right, even if it meant confronting the hardest truths about myself. I would not allow my impulsiveness to define my relationship with Clara any longer. It was time to take responsibility and forge a new beginning, one step at a time. The day of the family meeting arrived, and the atmosphere felt charged, as if the very air around us buzzed with unresolved tension and unspoken words. I entered the living room, where the furniture was hastily rearranged to facilitate conversation, the sunlight spilling in through the large windows, illuminating the dust particles swirling like our chaotic emotions. I could smell the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a desperate attempt to soothe our nerves, but it did little to alleviate the weight pressing down on my chest. Clara was already seated, her posture rigid as she nervously fiddled with the hem of her sweater, a small gesture that spoke volumes about her state of mind. I approached her cautiously, each step feeling like I was walking on fragile glass. "Mom, thank you for agreeing to this. I think we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling slightly. The words felt heavy as they left my lips, filled with the weight of my regrets and hopes for reconciliation. As we began to discuss our feelings, I could see the flicker of defiance in Clara's eyes, a reflection of the hurt I had caused. "You think a meeting can fix everything, Zoe?" she asked, her voice tinged with skepticism, each syllable laced with the pain of our past. I felt my heart sink. It was clear that she was still grappling with the fallout of my thoughtless words. "No, I don't expect it to be easy," I replied, desperation creeping into my tone. "But I want to try. I want to make things right between us." I could feel my palms growing sweaty, the tension palpable as I searched her face for any sign of willingness to engage. Memories of our shared laughter and tears flooded my mind, reminding me of what was at stake. Our connection was worth fighting for. As the conversation progressed, I noticed small cracks in Clara's defensive facade. Her expression softened slightly when I recounted the times she had been my rock, the moments that had shaped our bond. "Remember when you stayed up all night helping me with that project?" I asked, a hint of nostalgia creeping into my voice. Clara nodded, her lips curling into a faint smile, and for a moment the distance between us felt less daunting. Yet the underlying resentment was still present, simmering just beneath the surface. Just when it seemed like we were making headway, our discussion took a sharp turn. Clara's voice rose, filled with frustration. "You don't understand how your words hurt me, Zoe. It felt like you wanted to push me away completely." I could see the tears welling in her eyes, and my heart ached at the thought of causing her such pain. In that moment, I felt a surge of determination. I know I messed up and I'm truly sorry. I never meant to push you away. I just didn't know how to express my feelings without hurting you. Can we work on this together? I reached out, my hand hovering between us, a silent plea for connection. Clara hesitated, and I could see her weighing her options, caught between the desire to protect herself and the hope for healing. Finally, she sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. Okay, let's try. But you need to understand that it's going to take time, she said, her voice softer now, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her defenses. I felt a glimmer of hope spark within me, realizing that this was the first step toward rebuilding our fractured relationship. As the meeting continued, we began to discuss our emotions more openly, the atmosphere shifting from one of confrontation to tentative understanding. We both shared our fears, insecurities, and hopes for the future, and with every word I felt the heavy weight of resentment begin to lift. It was a delicate dance, a balancing act between vulnerability and strength, but I could sense that we were both willing to try. By the time we wrapped up, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief wash over me. We had not solved all our problems, but we had opened a door, a possibility for healing that had felt so far away just hours before. As I glanced at Clara, I saw a flicker of warmth in her gaze, a sign that perhaps we could find our way back to each other after all. In that moment, I understood that the road ahead would not be easy, but at least we were walking it together. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of hope rise within me as we began to map out our next steps toward healing, a journey I was finally ready to embark on with my mother by my side. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, and the living room felt charged, as if every corner was alive with the weight of unspoken words. I stood at the threshold, the sunlight pouring in through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted around me, a desperate attempt to soothe the palpable tension that hung like a thick fog. Clara sat on the couch, her posture rigid and defensive, as if she were bracing herself for a storm. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs as I approached her. "Mom, we need to talk about what happened," I said, my voice trembling slightly, betraying the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. Clara looked up, her eyes a mixture of defiance and hurt, and I felt a pang of regret for the pain I had caused her. "What could you possibly say that would change anything?" she retorted, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. The rawness of her words struck me, and I felt my resolve waver. I had come here to confront her, to lay bare my feelings, but the fear of her rejection loomed like a dark cloud overhead. "I just want to explain myself." "I never meant to hurt you, Mom," I replied, desperation creeping into my tone. I could feel the tension crackling between us, a tangible force that demanded to be acknowledged. Clara's eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line, and I knew I had to tread carefully. "You think words can just be taken back? You think our relationship can be fixed with a few apologies?" Clara's voice wavered, and I could see the tears shimmering in her eyes, reflecting the pain I had inflicted upon her. I felt my own heart breaking at the sight of her suffering, and it fueled my determination to fight for our bond. "I know I messed up, but I want to make it right. I want us to heal together," I pleaded, my eyes searching hers for any sign of willingness to engage. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until finally Clara sighed, her defenses beginning to crack. "Healing doesn't happen overnight, Zoe. It takes time, and I need to know you're committed to this," she said, her voice softer now, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her walls. I nodded, relief flooding through me as I realized that this moment could be the turning point in our tumultuous relationship. As we sat there, exchanging our truths, I felt the intensity of our emotions shifting from anger to a cautious understanding. The confrontation had been fraught with tension, but now it felt like the first step toward catharsis, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. In that moment, I understood that while the road ahead would be long, we were finally on it together, ready to face whatever came next. The dim light of my workspace flickered as I sat surrounded by crumpled papers and hastily scribbled notes. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and frustration, each breath heavy with the weight of my thoughts. I could hear the distant hum of my family going about their day, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within me. I felt a surge of determination coursing through my veins, a sharp contrast to the guilt that had plagued me since the dinner. No longer could I sit idly by while the remnants of my impulsive words echoed in my mind, haunting me like a ghost. I opened my notebook, its pages filled with half-formed ideas and plans that danced around the concept of revenge. My fingers trembled slightly as I began to write down my thoughts, the ink flowing onto the page like a river of resolve. I had to take action, to show Clara the consequences of her dismissal of my feelings, yet a nagging voice in the back of my mind questioned whether this path was truly the right one. What if retaliation only deepened the rift between us? The thought tightened the knot in my stomach, but the urge to make her feel my pain was overpowering. "This ends with me," I muttered under my breath, my eyes narrowing as I focused on the task at hand. I envisioned scenarios where I could confront Clara, each one more daring than the last. The urge to strike back was intoxicating, like a sweet poison that threatened to overtake my senses. I could imagine her face when she realized the extent of my hurt, the realization that her actions had consequences. Yet, a flicker of doubt lingered. Was I willing to risk the fragile connection we had begun to rebuild? As I continued to write, I felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation wash over me. I needed to strategize, to turn my pain into a plan. I began mapping out the details of my approach, visualizing the setting where I would confront her, the words I would use to express my hurt without crossing the line back into cruelty. Every line I wrote felt like a step closer to reclaiming my power, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a tightrope, one misstep away from losing everything. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the passing time as I sat in my cocoon of determination. I knew I had to act soon, to channel this energy into something tangible before it slipped away. My heart raced with anticipation as I finalized my plan, a concoction of revenge and a desperate desire to be understood. I took a deep breath, ready to step into the chaos I had created, hoping that this confrontation would lead to catharsis, even if it meant risking the fragile thread of our relationship. My focus sharpened, and I felt ready to execute my plan, the culmination of my thoughts swirling in a storm of emotions. The family gathering unfolded under the watchful gaze of flickering candlelight, illuminating the tension that filled the air like a thick fog. The aroma of roasted vegetables and fresh bread mingled with the scent of anxiety, creating an almost suffocating atmosphere. I could hear the soft murmur of voices, each word laced with unsaid emotions, as I stood there, heart racing, preparing myself for the confrontation I had dreaded yet craved. My palms were clammy, and I could feel the sweat beating at my temples as I caught a glimpse of Clara across the room, her expression a mix of apprehension and defiance. As I approached her, the murmurs faded into a dull hum. My heart pounded in my chest, threatening to drown out my thoughts. I was acutely aware of the eyes upon us, the weight of my family's expectations pressing down like a heavy cloak. It felt as if the very walls were closing in, and I had to fight the urge to bolt away from the impending storm. "We need to talk, Mom," I said, my voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of fear. Each word felt like a lifeline, a chance to break through the barrier that had formed between us. Clara's eyes narrowed, a flicker of indignation sparking in their depths. "Is this really the time, Zoe?" she shot back, her voice sharp like glass. I could see her defenses rising, a fortress of hurt built around her heart, and I knew I had to penetrate it to reach her before it was too late. "It is the time," I replied, my tone firmer now, fueled by a mixture of desperation and resolve. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. We need to face what happened. I need you to understand how much your words hurt me." I watched as the tension in her shoulders shifted slightly, a sign that she was at least listening, even if her expression remained guarded. The room was charged with emotions, the air thick with anticipation. I could almost hear the heartbeat of my family, a collective rhythm of worry and hope. Clara opened her mouth, but I pressed on, feeling a surge of urgency. I didn't mean to lash out. I was scared and overwhelmed. I felt like I was losing you, and I didn't know how to express that without hurting you, but I'm here now, willing to fight for us. Can't we try to fix this together? Her expression shifted, the rigidity of her posture softening just a fraction. "Zoe, you don't understand. It felt like you were pushing me away on purpose." "I thought I was losing you too," she admitted, her voice quivering with the weight of her vulnerability. It was a crack in her armor, a glimpse of the hurt I had inflicted, and I seized the moment. "Then let's not lose each other. I can't bear the thought of you not being in my life. Can we please talk openly without the walls?" I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, the emotion spilling over as I reached for her hand, desperate for connection. Clara hesitated, her breath hitching as she looked at my outstretched palm, and in that moment I sensed the potential for reconciliation hanging delicately between us. As our fingers intertwined, a wave of relief washed over me, mingling with the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. "I want to understand you, Clara. I want to heal this rift. Just please let's talk it out. No more hiding," I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara squeezed my hand, and I felt the warmth of her touch seep through the cracks of our fractured relationship, igniting a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other after all. The air was filled with a tentative warmth as the family gathered around the dining table once more, the flickering candles casting soft shadows that danced across the walls. The aroma of comfort food wafted through the room, blending with the scent of fresh flowers, a reminder that life continued despite the turbulence we had faced. I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation as I glanced at Clara, her face softer now, a reflection of the vulnerability we had shared during our earlier conversation. This was a moment of reckoning, a chance to rebuild what had been fractured between us. As we settled into our seats, I could sense the lingering tension that still clung to the air like a heavy fog. Clara reached for my hand, her grip steady yet tentative, as if testing the waters of our newfound understanding. Zoe, I'm glad we talked. I've realized that we both have things to work through, she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. I nodded, my heart swelling with a mixture of hope and remorse. It was a fragile truce, but it felt like the first step toward healing. We began to share our reflections, the conversation flowing more freely than it had in weeks. I recounted my feelings of fear and isolation, how my impulsive words had been a desperate cry for help rather than an attack. Clara listened, her eyes reflecting understanding as she shared her own struggles with feeling unappreciated and misunderstood. This exchange of truths felt like a balm on our wounds, each word weaving us closer together, mending the rifts that had formed between us. At that moment, I realized that healing wasn't just about seeking forgiveness. It was about acknowledging each other's pain and allowing space for growth. Clara's voice trembled slightly as she admitted, I've always wanted to protect you, but I see now that my overprotectiveness pushed you away instead. Her honesty struck a chord within me, and I felt a renewed sense of determination to nurture our relationship, to ensure that the love we shared could thrive amidst the complexities of life. As the evening progressed, I could see the flicker of hope in Clara's eyes, a spark that reminded me of the bond we had forged over the years. We ended the night with laughter, the sound echoing through the home, filling the spaces that had once felt so empty. I knew that this was only the beginning of our journey toward reconciliation, but it was a start, and for the first time in a long while, I felt optimistic about our future. The weight of my past actions still lingered, but it was no longer an anchor pulling me down. Instead, it felt like a lesson learned, a stepping stone toward a brighter tomorrow. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on the evening's revelations. I could feel the warmth of Clara's hand still lingering on mine, a reminder that we were in this together. I drifted off to sleep with a heart full of hope, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that we were both committed to healing and growing together as a family. This was a new chapter, and I was determined to write it with love, understanding, and an unwavering bond that could weather any storm. The soft light of dawn filtered through my bedroom window, casting a warm glow that enveloped me in a sense of calm. I lay in bed, reflecting on the tumultuous journey that had brought me to this moment. The echoes of laughter and the familiar scent of coffee wafting from the kitchen reminded me of how far Clara and I had come. The weight of our recent struggles still